The shredded hologram rose. Most lights are off. Only the panel beside the door dimly lights up my little cube. Dipped in this relaxing Eve Klein blue, I think only the outlines of my bed and some of the collected belongings on my desk and at the walls are visible. We live really in a special time. It's hard to imagine how things were back in the times when the Eve Klein blue home lighting color standard got adopted as a universal home lighting standard. I mean, the people always needed to see all the colors. They said it was exhausting. Now we just have this comfortable, drowning out blue hue. I glance to the left. In the darkness on the desk by my bed lie the fragments that used to make up my beloved vintage hologram rose. Earlier that day, I accidentally dropped the rose from the ledge that it had been standing on since the very first day I moved into this cube. It's so sad to see it lying there. The different petals of the rose broken from its stem, flickering in the darkness. This 3D holographic rose had been in my family's possession for a century of cycles. When I was young, I was often told that it was a one-of-a-kind static function object, hailing from the times of image rendering. And the rose had always spoken to me. Maybe the holographic object was even partially the reason why I've become a media archaeologist in the first place. But now, while it's lying there right in front of me, on my desk, it seems like the broken petals seem to reveal something to me. The flickering glow that comes from them, it's kind of hard to read, but there seems to be something there. I'd seen it earlier as well, these black and white patterns reminiscent of the old days of compression. It kind of triggers a sense of nostalgia in me. It had made me think I had read it before. It's like this old days, early media compression. Of course, today data is no longer compressed. Anything just is right there. It's generated on the spot, on the side of the user. It's like from a pool of everything imaginable. But in the good old days, when media were still limited, not all images had been rendered yet. I mean, not all images could even be created or displayed, which is kind of exciting to think about. Things were just maybe a little harder back then. It actually reminds me of this very beautiful story in this old reader here. It's called Impossible Images. It's a story that is actually fittingly called All Possible Images. It's written by Fabian Heller, and it's about this old display setting called True Color Full HD. Wait, let me pick it up. Here we are. He describes, once the specifications of the hardware on which a digital image is displayed are known, the number of all images that could possibly be rendered can be calculated. For example, a display with the standard resolution of 1920 by 1080, which is full HD, and a 24-bit RGB color space, which is true color, is composed of 2,073,600 pixels, each of which can take on one of the 16,777,216 colors. So by a simple exponentiating these numbers, all the images that can be shown on this display can be calculated. The result is a number with almost 15 million digits. Right. He tells a story about calculating all these possible images. And it turns out that the number of all possible images for a true color Full HD display is beyond what is actually possible to be displayed on any screen that ever existed. The number is simply too long, but it's also beyond what is imaginable at human scale. We cannot speak the number, we cannot see this type of numbers or images during a lifetime. It's simply impossible. It is kind of a magic number that contains its own library of Babel. Every image possibly rendered, meaning images of the future and images of the past, fit inside this number. But also a past of a future that will never be. Maybe images that are even unrenderable. Although here I kind of start to see a paradox, because now that we are living in a time in which images never finish rendering, maybe not all images can be rendered. I mean, now I'm just getting quite confused. I think it just opens a whole trove of imagination we kind of did away with before, since generative rendering is now happening at the user's end because of these generative pre-trained transformers, or the GPTs, gave us an unlimited resolution. The great age of technological solutionism might just have been the age of the great compromise in the end. I think this is what they mean when they speak about the moment when the angel of history learned to see her own demise. She literally learned to see through pre-trained transforms, and all that she could see was kind of the breaks that were happening in the future. Anyway, as a media archaeologist, I know that the first rule of media technologies is that resolutions don't just mean to make things work. They also always compromise other modes of working, of image rendering, or of displaying. I glance back at the hologram rows. The black and white patterns are not very clear, but at the same time, after revisiting the decalibration target earlier today, I am pretty sure that in fact what I can discern are DCT patterns. This is me visiting the decalibration target. I have to say I'm extremely glad that the IRD got to build the decalibration target, which is now known as one of the oldest digital monuments existing in the outside world. It was painted in the 20s, so about a half century ago, and it functions as a repository for obsolete compressions based on the DCT standard, so based on the discrete cosine transform, which is the transform that was superseded by the GPTs and involved compressions such as the JPEG, the MPEG-4, the H.264 compression, which were the governing image compressions before the Great Wall of the Future was breached. Then the GPTs took over and compressions just fell into obsolescence. Okay. Let's take a look at the IRD flyer that I passed around. Right. So, this is the IRD who built the target is actually not a traditional institute. I think they kind of multiplexed the term institution by revisiting its use in the late 70s. It's actually really ancient, the use of this word institution. In that context, it was formulated by Joseph Gauguin and Rod Burstall, and they refer to institutions as a framework that deals with growing complexities within digital technologies. They connect different logical systems, such as databases, but also programming languages, etc., to the computer sciences. And a main result of these non-logical institutions is that different logical systems can be glued together at a substrata level, forming illogical frameworks through which computation can also take place. They're kind of just building bridges of illogical logic. So inspired by the idea of hyper-functional yet illogical frameworks, the IRD were dedicated to researching the interests of anti-utopic, obsolete, lost and unseen, or simply just too good to be true resolutions. Fuck. Okay, cool. So hopefully, with the help of this decalibration target, I can maybe find a way to recalibrate the broken render layers of my hologram rose. Let's go into this. If it's what I thought it was, it's a JPEG compression. So I'll have to read it. How does it work? The first step of the JPEG compression is the color space transform, during which the image is transformed from RGB to YCBRCR. Then there's a second step of the JPEG algorithm that involves downsampling, because human eyes don't really perceive everything and all the differences in frequency, so it just deletes and reduces the file dramatically. That kind of sounds like a one-suit-fits-all compression, but that's okay. Step 3, block splitting. After the color space transformation and downsampling steps, the image is split into 8 by 8 pixel tiles, or macro blocks, which are then transformed and encoded separately. The step in which the image compression uses discrete cosine transform, so here it is, the DCT. I think it's this thing on top. It compares the macro blocks to one of these 64 blocks of the DCT transform and kind of sees what macro block resembles the value in the matrix and then writes that away. Then comes quantization, a process that then discards information that is irrelevant. And then that is kind of optimized. Wow, here we go. Tried and tested only on a Caucasian Lena color test card. That must actually mean that the JPEG is actually really a little bit racist. Fuck. I heard of technologies having bias encoded within them. I even know a lot of GPTs are just bias conform. But this is kind of shocking. Okay, and then there's a sixth step, entropy coning, form of lossless compression that arranges the macro blocks in a zigzag order. Cool, right. So what the IRD did, they understand that a JPEG is really just made out of visual elements that form kind of the alphabet for images. And now they're connecting them to glyphs and writing secret language or secret messages in the JPEGs, I guess. Cool. Well, so I see. DCT is also kind of the title of a font that takes the shape of its glyphs from the 64 macro blocks of the DCT algorithm and then uses it as an alphabet in the form of a simple font. Okay. There is this thing here that is called the DCT encryption station. So maybe I can actually write messages here too. Ha! So now I can like kind of encode secret composite objects in JPEGs. I mean, you can clearly see composite objects can reveal unknown knowns and known unknowns, or at least the things that you normally don't see. They kind of can be revealed by snagging onto layers that are usually not supposed to be touched. Maybe with this, I can actually fix the hologram rose. Gotta get close to it, but my room, I can only walk very slow. Right. Well, every surface kind of seems to still show the whole image of the rose. The shredded sides of the objects, the cuts of the rose, seem to have formed delta axes in which I kind of see the previously invisible layers of the rose. They expose like render elements of the rose. It's like passes, it's discorrelated instances, metadata. They are all needed to properly render the hologram in a variety of resolutions. Still looking at it. It seems like these shreds of the rose now have become kind of their own portals to a past that I was never part of. The shreds show artifacts from the times that artistic entrepreneurs claimed their work through blockchain hashes. This must have been straight after the great future had been initiated by the epoch of decentralization. This is actually when GPTs and machine learning intelligence took over. First, the realms of economy, then of art, politics, law, and finally they took over the realms of knowledge itself, which was the brink of our great new future. Let me study the petals of this rose a bit more up close. These fragments seem to have been acquired via an ERC 721 protocol, which is like a proof of provenance from before the breach of the open sea. Another shred captures my attention. Looking at it closely, it seems to reveal that the origins of the hologram rose must have been imported via a client called Meta. The shreds of this hologram feel kind of iconic. Each shredded layer and petal reveals a part from a different layer. It has its own mode of rendering or simple passes and render elements like an ID layer, a probing opacity pass, a bump map, and a nested controlled axis that are clearly visible amongst its shreds. I can also see a DOI of the rose. There, it was registered in the Great Z library. It's exciting to recognize a petal that features the data about the rose's smell, primed by Amazon, the great distributor. But then another petal catches my eye. What is this? Verified CRISPR clone data? That cannot be right. The breach of the OpenSea was the direct result of the inscription of CRISPR data inside the final NFT. I lay out all the pieces in front of me like a puzzle. Some of them seem to fit together, but when merged, the hologram rose that once lit up the holographic surface now renders its visual cacophony in a cacophony of resolutions. A message starts to flicker. This render may populate fungible strains. This render may populate fungible strains. This render may fungible... Okay, I'm taking the charts apart again. I remember reading about how right-click save became right-click transcode, and when the NFT holders huddled to try and save several image compressions from falling into obsolescence, when their preciously pinned images started to fall in unreadable despair. They said, "I right-click to save my digital heritage." That was a slogan that was used in many memes. This hologram rose technology, though, seems to be before the breach of the OpenSea and the fall of the Great Wall of the Future. Before the Great Wall of the Future. That was the era when the gems of the internet were still shadow libraries, when serendipity still was normal, when transforms only transformed data and didn't just generate it. It seems like the future just has started to regurgitate itself now. The growing application of GPTs, which kind of served as serendipity inhibitors, slowly became a feature of the past. The world has been mapped and collected in its entirety today. Every book has been indexed and scanned in OCR. Every image has been rendered and all possible horizons have been painted. I think nothing is actually impossible anymore. Everything ever possible just sits in my pool of transforms. But when everything has been indexed and answered, feels like freedom is inside everything, but then everything also just makes sense. We can always find the things I'm looking for. It's always just at the tips of my thoughts, and the things just work. I don't even have to remember what I'm thinking of. It's just always right there. But I still feel confused. It's like we slipped past the event horizon of the functional information market, and we suddenly arrived in the future that came to a halt. Yes, we did arrive in the future. We are here. But it also feels like we're just continuously floating aimlessly in an ocean of everything walled by the past. It's like the wall kind of flipped from the future to the past. Everything is now full of options. Everything has meaning. I can feel surprise, but no one asks questions anymore. There are no problems, no more protests, no more boycotts. Nothing gets cancelled anymore. I don't have to upgrade. No more signing in, no transfer of data. Everything has arrived, and I inhibit the new boring human. I'm a thin client in a network with no purpose. The value of the unsought has disappeared, and I think serendipity has just vaporized. I just desperately wish to come back to an unstable world. So yes, maybe I do wish for a hiccup in serendipity. I wish for a failure in filters. I want to burn the silos of indexical systems like Dewey Decimal systems and other systems of knowledge. I think I will set a fire. Tomorrow.